Hello, Dental Team listeners. This is Kiera and the one and only Brittany Stone coming back for part 2 of our hygiene conversation. Britt, welcome back. How are you?
Thanks. It's always fun when you start off with my full name. So I'm like, all right, let's go.
It is funny. You do range from Brittany, Britt, like no BS Britt, to B. B has recently come in. How do you feel about just B? I hope it comes across as like nice, but then I realized like, hey, B could be taken wrong. So I never say that. Hey,
you're not the only one. I'm fine with it because it's easy. And I'm like, shoot, you grew up with the initials BS. Like, what are you going to do?
Well, I never want to, like, sometimes when I call you and I'm like, hey, B, and I'm like, I hope it lands as like,
Britt.
Love.
It's Britt. Yeah, it stands for
Britt. It's not meant for any other letters.
Yeah.
But Britt and I, if you didn't listen to our other podcast, Britt and I were chatting shop about how to hire hygienists in today's economy. And with Britt bringing a hygiene perspective, if you don't know, Britt used to be a hygienist. Britt, how long has it been since you graduated dental hygiene school? Let's just give people your scene.
You're going to age me a little bit here.
Okay, don't feel aged. The only reason I asked for it, so before you answer, just know my reasoning so you don't have to answer. I was just thinking because I wanted people to know you've been in the field for enough time to give weight to your answers. But maybe we don't need to do that. Maybe Britt's been there for longer than 5 years.
18, Kiera. 18.
Shut. I didn't even know that. All right. Well, you have
I'll say this. I was a young graduator from high school. So I'll give you that. That like pushed me a year ahead. But 07 is when I graduated. So it's this year we'll make it 18.
Dang, girl. I didn't even know. Okay, so Britt really has a lot of weight. And you did hygiene and then Britt went from hygiene to then office management of a pretty large DSO and then came consulting and now does consulting and operations. So
yeah, I did full-time hygiene for a decade. So I'm like a solid like 5 full-time, 40 hours for a decade.
Man, I really there's some moments that I just see you as a hygienist. Like I can just picture you walking up with your it's not a swagger, but you have a cant that you definitely walk. And I can see you walking up, getting your patient.
You can call it swagger. I'll take swagger.
Hey, B, how's your swagger? But yeah, so I'm like, I could imagine you being a hygienist sometimes. But then you're like Britt the consultant, Britt operations, Britt my yin and yang. So anyway, well, that's fun. Okay, so to give Britt credit, she did hygiene for a decade. I won't say anything about loops, Britt. We will not discuss that on this episode.
I mean, I just aged myself a little bit. So, we talk about it. I would have them now if I was full-time clinical for sure.
Yeah, of course. I know you would. You stay very current. I do appreciate that you stay very current with hygiene. You attend Hygiene CE all the time. So what we were talking about on the last episode that this would be part 2 of was we talked about kind of like how do we work with the compensation pieces of hygiene, and then talking about it from a business standpoint and a doctor standpoint and a hygienist standpoint, and really bringing those two perspectives to the table, which is what the podcast has been built to do, is bring different perspectives. And something I just want to reiterate today, if you missed the last one, is that the things Britt and I talk about today are going to be perspectives and never meant to weaponize. So doctors, we can't weaponize it against hygienists, and hygienists, we can't weaponize it against doctors. And so really just setting the stage today of let's have an open conversation around where are we at, the dynamics. There's no like hiding the fact that it has been hard to hire hygienists since COVID. We thought that it would probably be 4 years, maybe 5 years before the hygiene shortage caught up. I still think it's in massive catch up time. Then you tack in inflation on it. So raise the amount people are coming out asking from school. Britt, I mean, I don't really want to ask, but I am going to ask. I'm sure hygiene has been a tempting field to go back into. I'm like, you work at dental aid team, but you've got hygiene over there and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I think if I was in your shoes, I might just contemplate it here and there, especially on days when it maybe isn't your favorite day at dental aid team, which is hopefully and never even
everybody's got a day here and there, right? It happens sometimes. But
I know it happens. We just had it a week ago.
I mean, here's the thing. I love hygiene and I left it loving it. So that's the thing is I still go back. I still dabble from time to time, but going back full time, the things that are appealing, right? Hygienists know. What do I love? it's like pretty predictable, right? Like you got a
That
job,
just fit you so much, Britt. The
100%
stability, the
predictable. Got my hours I'm going to work. I know my schedule. If I can get the doctor to work with me, I can manage running on time. So like, and then when I'm done at the end of the day, I go home and I don't have to take it. Like, there's nothing for me to do outside of the office other than like learning stuff, but there's nothing to do outside. So like, we know that those are the perks of hygiene. And that's part of why I loved it, is because of those reasons. Do I debate going back? I don't know. I enjoy what I do now. It's different, right? Like, you grow and you morph into different things, and it's fun to take the next step. And could I go back to it? Sure. Would it be different? 100%.
It's fair. I was just curious because I mean, like I know I've looked at what I want to go back into management, what I want to go run a regional, what I want to run a DSO, and for me, there was like a lot of fun in it. There was a lot of fun in being an assistant, but I think I agree with you. I feel like I have morphed and evolved into things that I really enjoy. Like I really enjoy the creativity aspect. Do I sometimes wish, Britt? Like sometimes I do miss the like go in, just like your day. You don't have to like be thinking and creating nonstop, and you leave at the end of the day and like we're done, we're done. Versus here, ideas will continue to. I mean, I saw you last night. You're building a whole spreadsheet, which is fun, but it never shuts off, unlike at the dental office. So
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
different times. But what we were wanting to chat about is we talked about compensation on the last one, and now it's coming into how can offices kind of like Britt did a really great job of like paying your junior like fresh out of school, and it's based on skill set, not based on longevity or tenure. Then we morphed into talking about what do we do for base versus commission if offices can't afford it, and different ways to navigate that. And so I wanted to just kind of finish up that conversation with a few other ideas of what's hygiene's take as a landscape of assisted hygiene and shortened appointments. Because as we were discussing on the last episode, it's kind of coming to this like necessity and survival mode for practices of like, hey, we're like running such a high number up for hygienists. So what this is truly called is innovation, and things are changing and shifting and adapting due to the nature of lower reimbursement rates of insurance. Inflation has come up. There's a hygiene crunch. So hygienists are coming up as a higher paid profession than what they were even 4 or 5 years ago. And so it's kind of like, well, what do we do? What about assisted hygiene? What about shortened appointments so that way we can have more appointments? And again, I'm not here to advocate for it. I'm just saying, like, this is the reality of what doctors are thinking of. And it's the thinking of this. They're also thinking of, do I bring a doctor in instead of hiring a hygienist? They're thinking of, do I do a hygiene less practice? So I'm just curious. Let's talk assisted hygiene first. Give me kind of a hygiene perspective on,
Uh,
because I don't know how it feels as a hygienist. So you get to speak. I know every hygienist is different, but like just what you hear from colleagues and your perspective.
every hygienist is different, and I feel like it's one of those polarizing things that I think there's people that love it, and either you love it or you're not really a fan of it. I feel like so that's like the I don't see a lot of in between, or it's like, sure, I'll do it for a little while we hire, like, even I would do it maybe for a little bit while we hire someone, but it's not my jam. I can't say that I love it.
Tell me
When it comes
why. Why don't you like it? Like, what is it about assisted hygiene, just from a hygienist perspective, that's almost like a grind for you that you're like, I'll do it for a little bit? Because I hear that all the time. Like, I'll do it for, like, what is it from a hygienist perspective that makes that a bit trickier?
I think the piece that makes it tricky is like you're just, I don't know, probably part of why we get into what we do is like the one-on-one with patients and interacting with them and being able to ensure like from kind of beginning to end, right? The team has an impact, but I'm giving them a good experience from beginning to end that doesn't feel rushed, that doesn't feel jumbled. And so I think that's for me personally, and I think some other hygienists, that's, it feels like great. I'm popping in, I'm in their mouth pretty much the whole time that I'm in there, and then I'm popping out and going on to the next one. I don't think it has to be exactly like that, but I think that's how it can feel from the hygiene side. I think having a really good assistant can make it much more doable. I think how you schedule it, right? How stacked that assistant hygiene is can definitely make a difference on how much time you've got to interact. And like, do hygienists we like a little bit of control? I don't know, probably. And so it's just like, I know I've reviewed the things. I think that's probably a difference between hygienist and doctor is I'm not leaving it to an assistant to review medical history or ask the questions or hear what's going on and gathering it. Like I get to do that from beginning to end when I'm working with them one-on-one. So it's just a little different when you've got the assisted hygiene in there.
So, and I'm also curious, like, I've never really scaled teeth for real. I mean, I kind of in Utah as an assistant, I was supposed to be able to prophy, and I'm like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. There was one time I pretended to scale because my hygienist was late, so I just like, I didn't even actually really touch their teeth. I just, like did a little tap, 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 waiting for this dang hygienist to come. And I was like, yeah, we'll just like get like started. I didn't do a darn thing. So I don't actually know what it feels like to scale that much. So I'm curious, like on a body, does it like hurt your hands? Is it exhausting to just go because you don't really get any break or reprieve? You're just going nonstop. I'm just curious. Or do like the ultrasonics and things like that now help that make it easier for you? I don't really know the mechanics of that.
I mean, so yeah, scaling time, like absolutely. Does technology help? Yes, I'm a big fan. I will say it. Polish first. Polish first. If you're not polishing first, you're spending a lot of time on stuff that you don't have to be spending time on. And I'm a big fan of ultrasonic or piezo. I will use it on pretty much everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like even my kids, because they got a lot of plaque and I can polish and I can get a lot done with that doesn't sound or feel the same as scaling. And so I'm a big fan of it. And then, so there's a lot you can do to help minimize it, but that's the piece of doing assisted hygiene. Usually it's if I've got an assistant, if they can polish, right, they're doing all the easy stuff. And so it is me just doing what's the stuff that I can do, piezo and hand scale, right? And so like it's more of that every day. And hygienists need to, dentists, hygienist assistants, right? We all need to take care of our bodies because it is a more physically taxing job than people think that it is. And so taking care of yourself, making sure you're doing some stretches. And so, yeah, it is a little bit more physically taxing to do assisted hygiene, but it's a lot better than it used to be because we got a lot better tools than we used to have.
Right. Okay, so that actually helps. And so I'm curious, like, let's just throw out a scenario. And Britt, we talked to offices about this in our consulting where, so let's say a hygienist, I'm going to use really easy numbers because I don't want to get wild. Let's say a hygienist is $30 an hour, which some of you are laughing at me. I know that's not even in the realm of your hygienist. I'm very aware of this. I also don't want to throw ranges out there intentionally.
Hypothetical.
Exactly. There's also a reason I'm not throwing high ranges out there because I don't want to set standards that are not realistic for your area. I feel like 30 is a safe number for me. So if I'm hiring a hygienist at 30 and I bring on another hygienist for 30, that would be $60 an hour that I'm paying of compensation for it. Well, in this area, if my hygienist is 30, odds are I could probably get an assistant for between like 17 to 20, realistically, if my hygienist is only at 30. I think that that's like a fair number, probably more like 15 in that area. But let's say they're at 20 just for easy math. I've got $30 for hygiene. I've got $20 for an assistant. I actually have $10 of extra, if you're following my math, $10 of extra that's not being paid. Britt, what are your thoughts of if an office takes that $10 and even if they pay a hygienist, say 35 an hour during assisted hygiene time versus just 30, does that actually make any difference for a hygienist? I know some can do more. Some it's going to be like you're paid 30, now I'm paying you 40 during your assisted hygiene days. Tell me like how that is from an office standpoint, because like there's obviously different compensation amounts we're going to be doing. And from a hygienist standpoint, does that feel better? Does that make it easier? Is that like, sure, I'll take on a couple assisted hygiene days. I'm always pro, don't run assisted hygiene every single day. I think that does burn your hygienist out. Mm-hmm. Usually if I recommend it, it's either for a day or a half a day for a hygienist, but trying to make it, but like, is that necessary, Britt, from your perspective from hygiene?
I mean, yes, some degree of compensation difference, 100% if you're running assisted hygiene. I know on the last episode we talked about, right, like a base plus commission. Mm-hmm. And I like that even for assisted hygiene because yeah, if we're doing assisted hygiene, we should be producing more. And so again, I do like that model because it naturally adjusts things and mm-hmm. compensates accordingly. So yes, I do think there should be some sort of compensation that's more on those days. And I do like it when it's, base plus commission. Now I've had one client where it's nice when you have a group of hygienists. I do love an office with a few. And they rotated an assisted hygiene day through all of them. And they were like fighting over who got the assisted hygiene day. Like they wanted it, right? Like, and it's because, yeah, they make more on those days and they were compensated based on their production was a part of it. And so they loved having those days to get a little bit more of a boost. And it was almost like, well, when we don't need it anymore, what's going to happen, because they all like getting that little bit of extra income coming from it.
And so, how do you even win over a team to do it? Because I agree. And I actually hear that more than I hear the opposite. I hear more hygienists actually enjoy it more than they thought they would. I
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot of them figure it out, especially when that's not my everyday. I think if they had to do it
Mm-hmm.
every day, it'd be a little bit more taxing. But think about it. You got 4 hygienists. We add an extra column of hygiene 4 days a week. We've literally brought in a whole extra hygienist without bringing a hygienist on. So I think it's a very creative way to do it. But Britt, how do I even like package this? I look in sales terms, like how do I even like convince a team that this is a great idea to trial it out, rather than just the resistance of hygienists saying no, just like you said, no, I want my patient care, I want to own over this, like I want A to Z. I hear all the time, we're going to have the patient care, it's going to be disrupted. And I'm like, well, it can be, or it could actually be more awesome. How do you win a team over to even be open to trying it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the office scenario, right? Like, what's the reason, what's the why that we're doing it? And I'm a big fan of like, hey, let's try it first, right? Like, I'm not saying you have to do it forever. I'm not saying you have to do it every day, but like, let's try it and let's figure out a system that feels comfortable and meets our like standard of care that we want to provide. So let's, start easy. Let's work through it. Let's train up an assistant. I do think assisted hygiene needs one of your best assistants
I
to be helping
agree.
in assisted hygiene to make it run smooth and give those patients that great experience. And so let's work through the system and see how it goes. And like, yeah, it's going to be compensated. If I've got a hygienist who's a gunner and likes to run and does not like to stop, then that's usually my first one. Then I'm like, great, let's team up. Let's get that figured out and see how it goes first. And then word can kind of spread because usually they'll do really well. And so, yeah, sometimes it's a personality thing, right? Some will love it, some will struggle a little bit. Sometimes there's people that like are going to be your ones to help you figure it out, and some are like, well, once I see someone else do it, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. All right, then I'll go ahead and do it. So I think depending on the reason why, I think trying it first, agreed with you, not an everyday thing. It can even be like start with half a day and see how it goes, and just start to figure out to find the rhythm of it. Because I think when you find the rhythm of it and you're like, yeah, that works really well, then it's like, okay, like we can do more of this. And I think it can run really well.
And I'm really grateful that you shared about the office that you have, that they all want it and they enjoy it, because I think that that actually can be the reality of what can happen from it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm really big when you roll it out, agreed. Having not a great assistant really will actually make this harder. So do not go and hire a brand new, fresh off the street assistant that does not know what they're doing, can't take great x-rays, can't move through, because hygienists having someone that they trust, that they can lean on, that they know is going to do a great job. If they can polish, that's a great way for them to be able to use it. And then really also another big piece are no new patients, no SRP, no perio maintenance put in that. It's really just pro fees, because that's going to make it so much cleaner for them to be able to run this effectively. And you're running it on the half an hour. And then doctors, you have to be very strategic of when you go in for exams. And doctors, you cannot be late on assisted hygiene, because that will throw your whole hygiene. Like it's a domino, and it will
What's
be
the quickest
tough.
way to take your hygienist off when you're asking them to do assisted hygiene? 100%. That's the way. That's the way to do it.
And that's not like a we'll be there, we'll be there. It's like you've got to get up and jump. But that's also with hygienists too, making sure that we're giving our doctors enough time. Like I try to ask hygienists to give a 30-minute window of exam time where a doctor could come in, so that way doctors can find the end time of prep, come and get their exams done, and keep everybody on schedule. So hygienists plug there, try really hard, because I know there's some hygienists who love to alert right at the end of the appointment, and then they're frustrated when doctor doesn't come in. Well, like let's notify when they could come in. Like let's take our x-rays the first 15 minutes and then try to get doctors out at that. I try to have
I'll
them
one
out.
up you a little bit on that. As soon as
Please do.
diagnostics are done, like as soon as my diagnostics are done and they've got X-rays, they've got peritarding photos, I'm letting them know. Come in anytime. I'm happy to have you. So, and of
Yes.
course, if there's a bunch of plaque that's gonna make it more difficult once I've got that done, then I'm gonna notify them. Come in anytime.
And then doctors, I try to have you out at the quarter to the hour, meaning like you're not walking into the exam, you're walking out of the exam. So that allows hygienists to polish, floss, wrap up, get everything done, get the patient out, flip the room, and get their next patient back on time. So I think that that's something that before I maybe rolled out assisted hygiene, doctors, I might take that on with the hygiene team. Like, let's get really good on our exams. Let's calibrate those exams up so they can be more efficient. Let's do the I have a better, Britt, I haven't told you my new acronym. It's not I crap. So if you've been listening to me, I have a new one. It's called I creep. So it's I creep when you come in. That's introduction, compliment, recap, and then a personal note. And if hygienists can get really good at that handoff when doctors come in or assistants, and then doctors are really good on their NDTR. So wrapping up your treatment plans, that's going to really help that synergy. And then also maybe doing what would doctor do to diagnose and to help tee up treatment. I think that that can just, again, we're all working together to make those exams as efficient as possible while also giving the best patient care. But I creep. That's my new one. It's not I see.
It's a step better. It's a step better than the last
creep.
one.
Someone was like creep, and I was like, amazing. I wish it could be CPR. I've been working to figure out different letter and words, so to be determined. But okay, let's like
real quick,
ahead.
one more thing on the exams, because with a really good assistant on exams, the other thing I think about, and that for me as a hygienist I care about as well, is making sure treatment is teed up really well.
Agreed.
And patients aren't having to repeat themselves and get frustrated and then not wanting to get treatment done just because they feel like they're not being listened to. So that communication piece and having an assistant who's really strong who can relay that information to doctor if they're the ones that are going to be in there for the exam, and make sure that it's teed up really well for the doctor and they can speak to it, is huge, because that's, we don't want to, rob Peter to pay Paul, right? I don't want to have not so great exams and not close as much treatment by adding an assisted hygiene. I'd rather leave it and get really good exams and really good case acceptance overall as a business. That's going to help me a little bit more. So just making sure that, again, that assistant's key, really quality exams for your patients, even though you're working assisted hygiene, make sure that experience is stellar. And it 100% can be done. It just takes a really good team to work together with a hygienist and assistant.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you can have forms where the hygienist can document it in there because people are in opposite rooms, but getting a good role and a good synergy is going to make this so much better for setting this up for success. And I think the answer is, I actually don't think hygienists hate assisted hygiene as much. I think there's quite a few little like tick boxes that if you can check them off, have a good assistant, have good exams, have doctors in and out on time, have the assistant really, really solid with being able to tee up the treatment and close the cases, have someone that has a similar vibe to the hygiene team that cares about these patients a ton. I think if you can check those boxes, hygienists are, and then you also compensate higher. There's so many little pieces that everybody's super excited about to do it. But I think if you're missing any of those 6, it does not feel as good to try. So
yeah, and patients are used to working with 2 people, right? So that's even, it's like, yeah, it's one more person in the mix, but on the doctor side, there's 2 of you. So having an assistant with hygiene isn't that big of a deal. Seeing the same 2 faces every time, like, they'll be fine with it, because I know that can be a concern. And I'm like, they're used to having 2 people on the doctor's side.
I say the same. I'm like, just because we're not used to it doesn't mean it's odd for the patient. I tell doctors when you're onboarding an associate, I'm like, you can assist each other. And I know that feels weird to you. To the patient, they're used to someone else in there. To a hygienist, they're used to people switching rooms. Like, it's not something, if we're not weird about it, your patient won't be weird about it. But I think we feel very awkward because we feel uncomfortable, but just not projecting that onto your patient, because I don't think it's as much as you might think it is. So,
and a plug for assisted hygiene, I always have someone to pair your chart for me. So I'll take that as a win.
That is a big win. I mean, truth. You're not having to call for it. Yep. Okay. The hot topic of shorter appointment times. I've heard 50-minute appointments, 45-minute appointments. Is this doable, Britt? And I think I'm going to know your answer, but I also like come from both. Come from hygiene Britt and operations Britt. Bring both of those Brits to the table when you answer.
I will. And I'll say this. I have worked in offices with all of the above. Right. Okay. So I've done all of the above.
Per decade, you guys of hygiene. Good thing we plugged that at the beginning.
So all are doable. I think there's a couple things that make a difference when it comes to shortening appointments, depending on what type of experience you want them to have, right? That's an important part to consider for doctors. Depending on our payer mix, what we need to do in order to keep the business running. True. That's something to consider. And then also how efficient we are as a team, and like doctor doing exams, right? That's an important piece of it. And then another one is our patient base / how good are we at keeping them healthy and not giving ourselves a lot of work every single time our patients come in, if you know what I'm saying. Those bloody profiles, they're a lot of work. So if I'm treating perio appropriately, I'm educating my patients, they're coming in regularly, we all know those are patients that are a lot easier to see and more efficient most of the time. And yeah, there's going to be, even working on shorter appointment times, there's going to be some, like, that person that's like an advanced perio patient. And I'm like, I cannot in my right moral standing do that in 45 minutes. It's going to be an hour. There's got to be some of that liberty where needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So I think I think the hard thing of switching appointment times is I do think it becomes an all model, because like for me to shift it, that's like it feels like a daunting project to
Mm-hmm.
like shift from 60 minutes to 45 minutes. Now I'm moving everything up. My exam times don't hit at the same time anymore. Like things just are moving all around. Um,
And
but
60 to 45 is a big jump. So
that's a huge jump.
I wouldn't go that far if we're gonna play around with times. Like maybe like you could go from 60 to 50. Most offices are running on 10-minute
I
increments.
agree.
So like you can make that shift, and it's just you've got to be really on point to run that efficiently, because the quality still got to be there. It's just we've got to be able to run really efficiently. And I'll add this, and depending on what all's expected within that appointment as well, right? If we want the hygienist to be super comprehensive, we want them to get scans done, we want them to collect a lot of information for us, like, I map it out, right? That takes me 2 minutes. That takes me 3 minutes. Like, what's reasonable in an appointment for us to get done by the minute mapped out, and then make your decision.
I think that that's a wise, and don't go for your fastest hygienist and don't go for your slowest hygienist. Let's find that middle ground of what's reasonable between the two, because you do have some. I mean, Britt and I, you can even hear in the way we talk, we've got different tempos. I mean, I bet you can guess
Uh-huh.
who's a little bit faster and who's a little bit slower between me and Britt. And sometimes it's really good, like Britt slowing me down and me speeding her up. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Britt and I would both agree that a happy medium between the two of us is the right spot to be, which is usually where we end just
Yeah.
in
And
decisions.
a team working together really well, right? Especially when I was working on 45 and 50 minutes. I mean, we had a fantastic clinical coordinator, right? So if my next patient was here and there was a room to be had, even for a few minutes to get x-rays done, and someone was available, they were getting those x-rays done and getting it started. So it's a different tempo and pace you run on, and it does take full team support. It's not gonna be like, oh, well, they're early. No, they're here. We have space to see them. Start getting them taken care of so that it helps your team members out and we get them out as efficiently as possible.
So that's a good point, because then it becomes, it's not just the hygienist. Because I think 60 minutes is kind of like hygiene does their own thing. We want them to do everything on
Mm-hmm.
shorter appointment times. We are trying to get more bodies in and out. But I did the
Mm-hmm.
math, and it's like if I'm going from 60 to 50, I'm getting 10 extra minutes per appointment. That's going to give me 80 minutes in a day. But that's not enough for me to get 2 extra appointments unless I do a 50-minute plus an additional like 30-minute. And so I would ask the question, Britt, and I don't know if you run the numbers or not on it. I mean, I haven't, so that's why I'm asking. But if I've got a hygiene team that does take ortho scans for us when we do ortho, I've got a hygiene team who's taking CBCTs for implants and we're teeing it up for all on X cases. If they're looking for sleep and we're doing snore tests on them, does it really make sense to get me one more hygiene patient for hygiene, or does it make sense to look to optimize the additional services? Now I get like we might be trying to get, because I'm like, well, what's the reason we're doing it? If we're trying to shorten the appointment times because we have too many patients, maybe it's worth looking at our fees. But if we're trying to get more patients in to optimize our hygienist pay, to be able to pay them and compensate for the amount of production they're doing. And I know a lot of offices don't pay hygienists for those scans. Like if you do a night guard scan or you do an ortho scan, it goes to the doctor, which I understand because the doctor is going to need to do a lot. But I'm just curious, like to me, it makes a little bit more sense, possibly. If my hygienists have 60 minutes, I'm already there. Why don't I try to optimize and maximize that appointment, paying them maybe a little bit of these scans that I want to be done, so that way they can hit their production number, but it benefits the office on a bigger scale. What are your thoughts on that, Britt?
And that's where I think it comes back to what type of experience, right? What type of office, what's your vision, right? It comes back to ultimately, right? Any business where it comes back to the volume value question, right? By cutting time, we're choosing volume. By using that time better, we're choosing value. So it's going to be a personal preference. I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong answer in that, because there's a lot of factors depending on kind of what your payer mix is like. I definitely have some areas that even for me, if I tried to move that the culture of the area, if I tried to move that patient at the speed that I need for a 45-minute appointment, they are not going to love it, even though I might be the most pleasant human being they've ever interacted with, because the pace that they run's a little bit slower, right? And so, right, when I was running 45 minutes, we were right outside of DC. Those people didn't want to be there that long, right? And they were, demographic was easy for us to run them through. And so they didn't mind the fast pace, and we still connected, but we were able to run like that. So I think it comes back to overall experience on what you want to have. And there's no right or wrong, but I love making more use of the time we have, which is where I think hygienists functioning to the height of their capability, right? If you can use laser and that's something your office wants to bring in, great. That's something that can be an adjunct service that adds to the production. What can you do for the patient? I think not only on the hygiene side, but that's where I think it really is a team to where what can I do in scans, in pictures, in educating patients about treatment options, talking to them about what do they really value, what do they really want, are there cosmetic things that they're looking for? There's a lot you can do, and I think that's for hygienists to realize. If we do well overall, right, everybody wins. So when we're able to get where we need to production, collection wise as an office overall, it makes it easier for us to say, yeah, that time is useful. We're making good use of it on the hygiene side. Let's keep our appointments at 60 minutes. Or if it's like, hey, we're not, we either need to do that and get things up, or we're going to have to evaluate and make some decisions, because sometimes there's just business decisions that need to be made, and we need to figure out how to adapt and innovate.
Yeah. Britt, that was such an insightful piece. And as you were talking, I just thought, I hope offices are listening, because I think that this is just a really good, this is where we have to get into the, why are we doing this? What are additional pieces, rather than just the quick surface level decision? Because I think there's so many pieces below it. Like you said, demographics, DC, 45 minutes makes a ton of sense. Those people are faster in and out. They're younger population. It's an easier model to roll that versus maybe, let's say, some areas in Arizona. You might not have you might have it in Scottsdale, Tempe, but if we're going a little further out to maybe some of those senior centers, that's not an ideal model for maybe an older population base. So really, like you said, and I think volume versus value. And I don't think it's the value that we're bringing to the patient. It's the value of, are we doing ortho? Are we adding these adjunct services to it? You obviously add value to your patients, but are we doing a lot of people? Or are we doing less people, but more extensive? That's going to be a clinical or a business decision, and also a clinical decision, and also a culture decision of what you ultimately want your practice to be. But I get it. You got to make these decisions. You got to make the business run. I would just caution, don't make the quick decision, because I think there's multi-layers below each of them to really consider. So Hygiene, Britt, thanks for coming today. Any last thoughts you've got as we wrap up assisted hygiene, shorter appointments? I think they are really good perspectives to bring.
I think my last thing, I like that you said, right, don't make the quick decision, evaluate it. And I think even hygienists, right, it's easy for us as team members. I do the same thing, right? I can see my world and what it's going to impact for me, but I understand there's more behind it than just my view. And so really taking a good look overall and seeing what's going to be the best decision. And how we're functioning now might make us think that we need to make this decision, but maybe we can keep running and function a little different to where we don't have to make that change.
Totally agree. I think it's a really good perspective. So if you guys are in this debacle, if we're speaking to your souls, this is what we love to do with our practices, is really weigh the pros and cons and help the office make the best decision for their practice, not just a decision, and really thinking through all the different pieces, and then executing and getting your whole team on board, helping the team see the pieces so you can really be successful. So reach out if we can help. hello@thedentalyteam.com. Britt, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. And for all of you listening, thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time on the Dental Team Podcast.